Hey, Brassfax here. I think it's fairly safe to say we're in the phase of closed emitter mailbox euphoria. When even Steiner is trying to get in on the closed emitter cult with their Decepticon-looking MPS, we know it's the new hotness. And like with many fads in the gun industry, they're actually based on fairly good, sound reasoning. But perhaps a non-insignificant portion of the buyer base will purchase these without realizing the why. They see something popular, read the tagline, and then they decide they need one for themselves without having the experience or knowledge base to understand the upsides and the downsides. So, closed emitter optics are cool, but I kind of want to talk today about the context or the when a closed emitter optic makes sense and when it doesn't make sense from the lens of the Holosun 509T. Speaking of the Holosun 509T, it honestly appears straight out of the box as one of the more appealing options, especially with the Gen 2 coming out, meaning the Gen 1 Holosun 509T now costs $320, which is pretty damn good. Go ahead and watch this video up here if you'd like a more in-depth comparison of the two. Walsh from ThinlineDefenese discusses them and shows them off compared to each other. TLDR, the X1 is functionally identical to the X2, except in terms of glass clarity, with the X2 being way less distorted while also having way less tint. Beyond that, they're functionally the same, but sometimes this absolutely does add up, and there are scenarios where the X1 will look like an overly aggressive Instagram filter with the vignette dialed to 12. But then in some scenarios, the X1 looks functionally identical to the X2. I'll get into it in a couple seconds. Anecdotally speaking, I would compare the 509T Gen 1 to being a slightly worse version of the RMR Gen 1, or a noticeably worse version of the RMR Gen 1, while the 509T Gen 2, the X2, is slightly better than the RMR Gen 2 in terms of, visual clarity in the day. I'm going to skip the rest of the comparisons and the explanation of Holosuns. I know, at this point your grandma probably knows how Holosuns work. Go watch any Holosun video. Actually, go watch my Holosun videos. By God, I need that engagement. You can check out any video. They all roughly behave the same buttonology, whatever. The 509T is actually unique in that it functionally can function on anything. Offset, piggyback, main optic, pistol concealed carry, pistol open carry, the list goes on. But, as I was alluding to earlier, just because you can doesn't mean you should, and there are clear use cases and weak points of the 509T that make it more adept in some cases than others. Real quick, mounting considerations. The 509T has its own proprietary mounting interface. It kind of looks like those old Weaver mounts. It's just a crossbar, which means you'll either have to direct mount via milling a pistol, for example, or using the included RMR pattern adapter plate, which gets you on an RMR system, which will result in a typically higher sitting optic with a touch more weight. Just something to consider. The first and primary use case of the 509T would be pistol mounted, right? That's the niche this optic was designed for. Both the 509T and the 509T X2 work very well here. The optical clarity issues don't really manifest when you're holding it at arm's length, and I have trouble noticing a difference between the two. Personally for me, go ahead and snag the X1 for this scenario. You're gonna save $100 and probably not really notice much of a difference. But that does still leave the question, what does this give us over a traditional micro red dot open emitter sight? Well, it's in the name. Closed emitter optics are optics where the emitter is enclosed. Hey, that was your brass facts of the day. But seriously, a open emitter optic can sometimes have issues where rain, water, debris, or whatever lands on the emitter and it distorts the actual beam of light, rendering the optic useless. For me in practice, however, the benefits of an open emitter sight are mostly irrelevant for concealed carry handguns, and 99% of concealed carry handguns start from concealment and end shortly thereafter. Even if you get in a defensive shoot with a Cat 5 Hurricane, the chances are actually quite minuscule that dirt, water, or whatever ends up on the emitter. There's also the factor that the 509T conceals slightly worse. For some people it doesn't, and if that's you, well then rock on, ignore this part. However, for many people, myself and my friends, they find the 509T prints ever so slightly more than a RMR 507 or whatever. Something about that flat surface just makes it print really obviously, especially in the appendix position. People also bring up the fact hey, you can clean out the lint easier, and yes, you can. You can clean the lint off easier because the lenses are far more flat and less recessed. But are we really making optic choices based off of how fast we can clean the lint off? However, for open carry handguns, be it a overt loadout, like for example you're running a plate carrier or a chest rig and you want a backup weapon system, just duty usage, so LEO or whatever you decide to pick, hell yeah. So the number one downside goes out the window. The optic is exposed and vulnerable to the elements, and by a pretty significant margin. Yeah, I don't see a reason not to run a closed emitter optic like the 509T in an open carry scenario. How about for rifle usage? So take the 509T, shove it on a Picatinny mount, and run it on a rifle or a rifle-like system. So think a carbine. Almost universally, no. It's better than the scenarios where people are running RMRs on full-size rifles, but personally for me, I don't see a single upside on running this on a rifle. First of all, the battery is the smaller 1632, which means just less battery, or more important, less battery commonality. The nature of it is also that it's a pistol optic, which means the emitter is far closer to the lens, meaning the angle is sharper. Put shortly, you're going to see more parallax versus any other style of red dot system. In tests, we were noting something similar to like an RMR or even an MRO type level of parallax. We didn't put it on paper, we just kind of tested it out, but at about 50 yards at a 3/4 bias, you'd begin to see misses. Even at small swingers at 25 yards, we were seeing very obvious misses due to parallax error. And as mentioned, the mounting interface is overly complex and kind of a clown fiesta for something like a rifle. But I'm sure a dedicated solution will be coming up real soon. However, even if it did, let's be frank, a Holosun 509T, Sig Romeo, or whatever Chinese T2 knockoff that floats your boat is basically going to be a better choice in both weight, cost, and capabilities. Alright, how does this do as a offset piggyback in conjunction with optics? So a secondary optic system for a primary sighting system. I think it actually really depends here, but generally it's quite good. In the offset position, the 509T is quite good, so like a 45-degree offset or something like that. Yep. It solves a lot of the concerns of previous options on the market where if your rifle tipped over or you set it down into the mud or dirt or whatever, that the optic would basically nosedive into the trash and you could potentially sideline your optic. This solves that completely. The 12 o'clock mount on an LPVO is also similarly good. We see increased durability and the aforementioned stuff. Just be aware you're going to get a weight gain due to the extra mounting stuff until they come out with dedicated mounts. You're also going to have issues with slight height gain. This is more of a training issue on the 12 o'clock position, but for the 45-degree offset, that could manifest in you having issues having it directly mounted over the bore for optimal placement. I'll specifically mention the ACOG piggyback position here. For the X1, this is absolutely a no-go. The slight height increase is noticeable when it's close to your face, but the bigger issue is the distortion of the Gen 1 looks like hot spaghetti mess when it's this close to your face. But more importantly, the parallax is exaggerated even further from where it already is, and you're going to have some problems. Not at all a fan. The X2 seems to do moderately better, but once again, there are better options. As a side note, this is why I eventually took off the 509T off of my Flux Raider, even though it looks great. I went for a different optic because of that aforementioned parallax issue. The final category I would consider buying a 509T for would be like a PCC type usage, like a small PCC. This is a spot where the 509T can be viable. If footprint or volume isn't too much of an issue, the aforementioned T2 clones all seem to just do the exact same thing for less or better. However, if space is an issue, the 509T offers a lot of space savings that the RMR, 507, Delta Point, do people still buy Delta Points, or whatever offer, while still removing a lot of the vulnerabilities of the aforementioned micro red dot sights. One final consideration, the 509T is fairly mediocre for night vision performance. It works, and more importantly, it dims to the correct level to allow night vision usage, which is not true for a lot of Holosun products. However, the glass clarity is such that it really wouldn't be my first choice for passive aiming. The RMR seem to just do it slightly better, and they fade away, like they kind of blur away. The 509T generally doesn't, depending on where you have it positioned. And for a rifle or even small weapon, the aims just seems to do far better and is just a clear-cut superior option for night vision passive usage. And that about covers it, right? It's a Holosun. I don't want to spend too much time on it. You don't want to listen to me spending too much time on it. So that is that. Just discuss some scenarios where I found it useful and not useful to run a 509T. Because I hate money and I'm financially irresponsible, I'm going to be giving away this 509T Gen 1 because I don't want to deal with selling this thing. and I'll give it away to a subscribe star in about 1 week time. So the next video, I'll post it, the winner there. So if you're a subscribe star, I'll enter you to win this prize. I'll normalize it or something, so if you have spent $5 on subscribe star, you'll have 5 times more chances than a theoretical $1 tier. Right? Makes sense? Cool. Awesome. All right, that is that. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.
This is just a colossal waste of... Look at this. You go the opposite way and all that. Woof. Just exits the dog. Look at this.
Welcome to high desert animal.
Anything we get off now just doesn't end up in my car to vacuum later. So. It's naive of you to think that like this is a zero-sum game. If you remove her hair, she'll just produce more on the spot. You're saying it's a futile effort? Maybe. Nova.